Welcome back to the Unstuck movement. I'm your host, Rob Z. This platform features true testimonies of breakthrough. Today, we're going to hear the testimony of Jeremy Reyes. Jeremy, thank you so much, number one, for being here. And number two, I love to dive into a powerful question right off the bat to get to the heart of the matter. I love your platform. It is called A Purpose Beyond Profit. And I want to ask you that question, leading things off. What made you decide to put purpose above profit in your business, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so it was 2021, very beginning of 2021. I was pretty much burnt out from running a marketing agency that was centered around making money and helping other people make money. And that was the entire purpose, the entire extent of my business. I was making every decision based on what would make the next dollar. And Rockefeller summed it up well when they asked him, how much money is enough? And he said, just $1 more. And I had been living that out for years and was able to do a lot of great things with the money I was making. But what God kept on convicting me of was, I want you to glorify me in the way in which you're making money, not just the output that you're creating. And so I found enough religious leaders and friends and people who are like, Jeremy, just keep doing what, like, there's some amazing results that you're getting. Just keep pursuing this and give your money to charity. And there's a lot of great things you can do with that money. And God just kept on bringing that back from my back burner to the front burner of, honestly, from a natural place of burnout and a natural place of just being totally unfulfilled in what I was doing, but also this just spiritual conviction as well. Of knowing that I was called to do something more that was meant to be more satisfying and fulfilling to my soul. And that ultimately was to love God and love people, even through my business. And I saw how just throughout scripture, how God talks about even when you're eating and drinking, glorify me. And I was like, man, if that's true of every area of my life, including my eating and drinking, it's got to be true of my business as well. Like, that has to be the overarching umbrella purpose. And I've got to find a way how to use my unique gifts and skill sets to serve people in a way that is loving to God and loving to people. And so I started to make that pivot in the January 2021. And really just came and sat down with the Lord and asked him, what do you want from me? Like, what do you want from me? And honestly, that was one of the first times that I asked him in several years what he wanted instead of what I wanted. And that realignment for me just kicked off things in a completely new, different direction. And I've never looked back since.
I love that. I cannot wait to learn more, man, because it's so good. And in business, it can be really difficult and tricky, right? We make it tricky to, like, how do we blend God into what we do? How do we put God first in what we do when we're trying to make money? And it's such an important topic. I've had this conversation with a few different people on the podcast, and I cannot wait to hear your journey of how you've transformed this for yourself and really centered things around serving people, what God wants you to do. So before we go there, first, though, this is the Unstuck movement. This platform was created to help you find breakthrough in your life and in your business, break the chains that have been holding you back. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com. Over 400 entrepreneurs from all over the world, servant leader, heart-centered entrepreneurs who want to help you out. That's connectedleadersacademy.com. And a quick reminder before we get rolling, if you're ready to become the go-to authority in your field and what you do, make a lasting impression in people's lives, and make the impact that you know you're supposed to be making with your voice and with your business, with your platform, head over to robzwentz.com. Join the waitlist for our exclusive Pro Podcaster Academy at robzwentz.com. Today, Jeremy, an entrepreneur from Lakeland, Florida, he runs Purpose Beyond Profit with his wife. He's passionate about this business, about serving others and creating purpose-driven impact. It's an honor to have you here today, sir. So going more into this, how did you have to change things to really make sure that you were doing what God wanted you to do in your business? Like, practically, how did you change things to make this make sense?
Yeah. Before I was empowered to make those changes that I've been making in my life, I had to start asking myself why. like why I was doing what I was doing. And what I saw was like, I could do things that looked okay on the outside, but I read in First Samuel that God is looking at my heart and that man looks at the outward appearance, and that my motivations and my intentions are what God was after. And so when I started to ask myself why I was doing what I was doing, I found greed. I found pride. I found trying to find my worth from what people thought of me, and catering and manipulating myself and my business to do what people liked so that I could make more money from them. And so people ended up becoming a tool rather than the mission. And money was the mission. And so it became manipulative. And like I said, when people become the tool rather than the mission, it's very it almost happens subconsciously. Like you don't say that out loud explicitly, but the change process started at the intention and motivational level, and allowing God to speak to my heart, allowing Him to meet me where I was at, and honestly, just have gospel affirmations. I remember, honestly, just like a few months ago, I went on this silence and solitude retreat, and I had this 3-hour segment, and I had predetermined that I was going to spend these 3 hours with a lot of lofty intellectual thoughts and great journaling time, and so I get to my like perfect spot, and right before we went out there, the spiritual director said, "Hey, sometimes it's okay to just slow down and just contemplate on one verse or one gospel truth." And so I was like, okay. So I thought of the sentence that sounded the most ridiculous to me, which was, "I am loved unconditionally." Because up to that point, I've struggled really my whole life with what a lot of believers struggle with, which is trying to earn salvation. And again, that's not something that you say out loud, but your actions reveal where your faith truly lies. And so when I'm catering for the outward appearance of things, I know that something is off at a faith level. Um, and so I started to just repeat, "I am loved unconditionally." And at first I couldn't really say it out loud, but I started to grow in that confidence of saying it more out loud. And as I was saying that, these flashbacks, I got a flashback to when I was 4 years old, when I felt the most alone I've ever felt in my life. Then I said it again, "I am loved unconditionally." And I had a flashback to when I'm 8 years old and I'm terrorizing my sister. And then I said, "I am loved unconditionally." And a flashback, and I literally went sequential through my entire life of every reason in my mind that God shouldn't love me and that I wasn't enough. And I kept on repeating that until it didn't sound stupid anymore, and it sounded more true to my heart. So I really, before I could make these changes to love other people in my business, I first had to accept God's love for me. And that wasn't a one-time thing that happened in 2021. It's something that I'm constantly realigning back to in my business. So at a high level, it was honestly, the change started there with just accepting God's unconditional love for me.
Wow. I'll tell you, man, that's so important. And I'm not gonna sit here and try to lie that I totally understand the what unconditional love feels like. And I think for a lot of people, that's the situation. And for me, it comes down to that identity. This is the thing that I have struggled with, and I pray about this a lot, is like understanding my identity, like how God sees me and how He loves me unconditionally. So I'm inspired by that myself. That's a really great passage to meditate on and to just work on, and to understand what that truly feels like. How did that revelation change you personally? Like how did it change like you in your personal life, and how you approach not even business, but just how you approach daily life?
Yeah. I realized that since I don't need people for my worth anymore, I can truly now actually love them. And so I found that it was pretty difficult to do both at the same time, to love people and to need them for your worth. Like those can't coexist. And so that need, as it was being reduced because I was accepting God's love for me, now I'm actually able to do that, not from a place of insecurity, not from a place of need, but now, like from a practical standpoint with my customers, like I actually love my customers and my vendors and my mission partners, and I love having conversations like this with people like you, where I just get to outpour what God is doing in my life. Like I don't have to manufacture. I was living like this double life before, where who I said I was with my mouth and the values that I had as as a human being and how I was running my business were completely out of alignment. And so I felt like the values I was running my business on were completely different than the values that my friends and family knew me by. And so I was living this double life. And so now, like in business, I get to have real relationships with people. I get to be one person who gets to outpour like what I read this morning in devotions, gets to show up sometimes. God uses that in my business. And like sometimes what he's teaching me in the area of a relationship with my wife applies to how I'm approaching my customers. And what I'm learning in my business applies to the rest of my life. And I saw how God created like one holistic human being that has their spiritual life connected to their business life, their emotions to their relationships to their mental health. Like everything is connected. And so that moving from that double life to that single life, I feel like my customers benefit from that a lot because I'm not trying to be someone who I'm not. I can hold space for other people to be in their struggle because now I get to be more authentic about my struggle. Before I had to present myself as a perfect expert. Now I'm someone who's just in the journey to figuring out what it looks like to love people through business. So I don't have to manufacture or create results that I can't control. I don't have to pretend to be someone that I'm not. I can show up truly as myself, and that allows other people and creates the space for other people to show up in the same way so we can have real transformation, because you can't move forward unless you know where you're starting at. And so I love meeting people where they're really at and starting there and figuring out what does it look like to actually love people in your business and build a sustainable business on top of that.
So good. So good. And that is one of the hardest things to do. It's not even just, I think that personal life and business life, especially when you have your own business, figuring that out is a giant challenge of like, who am I in these two different fields? And you don't have to be two different people, but you have this, at least I've had this mindset. I need to be a different person when I'm business Rob. I got to act differently. I got to think differently. I got to speak differently. I have to show up differently. But the more you can bring those two worlds together, I like to think of it like this, because I used to be in radio, right, for many years. And in radio, I was me. When I got really good at what I did, I was me, but I would turn the volume up on me a little bit, right? So in business, it's like being yourself, but turning yourself up. And then that turns around and bleeds into your personal life, where now, okay, I can be this person in business, so I should also be this person in my personal life. I should turn myself up a little bit and be more of who I really am. Allow God to work through me more. And when you can start to like rest in that place of living from that place, it's incredible the impact that you make. And you can something because of you being who you are, you being vulnerable, you talking about the things that you're struggling with, or just being transparent, right? Being transparent with people leads to them being transparent with you. And that can change everything. It can really change not just, and I love this because so many times we try to separate the personal and professional in life, and there's no separation between the two. If you're separating those two, you have a fundamental issue. So bringing those two into alignment is so powerful and so important. So I love the fact that you actually help people do that. You actually help them walk through that. What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn for yourself about pride when it comes to business? Pride's the thing that so many humans struggle with. It's the thing that God detests the most. So talk a little bit about that specifically, the hardest lesson you've learned about pride when you're doing your thing.
I would say probably learning that pride and insecurity are two sides to the same coin, and how much I was living in pride but didn't realize it because I was insecure. And it looks like the opposite, but it's not. When you believe that you're in control of your life, when things go well, you feel prideful because you're like, I did that. I'm awesome, right? But when things don't go well, which is how things were going in that transition period when I was starting over from scratch, going from $15,000 a month to $0 a month, and like questioning everything. When things aren't going well and you feel like you're in control, you have nobody else to blame but yourself. And so I think that was the hardest lesson, but also the most impactful lesson for me was learning how much pride was really there in my work. and believing that I was the provider of my family, that I was the sustainer of my business. And that humbling moment and continual moments as I continue to learn this more and more of how much really God is in control, and I can trust him with the results, but be faithful and obedient in the things that he's called me to do.
That's really good, man. It's so important. And it's such a challenge. And how do you find yourself resting in that now, or do you find it a constant evolution, a constant journey, a constant tweaking as you're going through this?
Yes. I find myself resting in that much more now, but it is an everyday battle, an everyday pursuit. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, and having your identity in Christ, and how that's a sure foundation. That's a rock, that you can build your house on, your business on, your life on. And everything else is shaky sand. So yeah, it's both. I'm resting in it more, but I also know that there's a long way to go. And that's one thing that I love about what I get to do, is I get to help entrepreneurs define a mission in their business that is inherently good. And what I mean by that is, when you're pursuing something inherently good, you never graduate from it. And so it's a constant everyday pursuit that you can put your head down and pursue. And by inherently good, I mean that its value is independent of the context. Meaning, in every role you play in your life, in every context, in every decision you have to make as a business owner, you can pursue your mission and it's not a pitfall. So for example, influence, impact. You can have good influence or bad influence. You can have good impact or bad impact. And so we kind of use these words, but they could potentially be a pitfall. Like, I was just coaching with someone yesterday. It's a free coaching call. I just met him, and he told me that we're going to help you accomplish your goals. Like, that was his mission, right? And the problem with that is, what if their goals don't align with the Bible, right? And so then you're like left in the moment, trying to make snap decisions, constant snap decisions of whether or not this aligns with the Bible, rather than choosing. And the mission that we defined for him was wise financial decisions, because he's an accountant. Wise financial decisions are always good in every context, in every role, with every person. You can always make wise financial decisions and know that's the right way to go. And so when you do that, you can turn around and help people who are one or two steps behind you, because nobody else has graduated from either. You find that you are leading a movement, not just pushing products and services. You're helping people progress forward towards something that is infinitely good. Simon Sinek calls it, he wrote a book called The Infinite Game. It comes at it from a secular perspective, but lands on the same conclusion that, man, to have real transformation and impact in people's lives, you have to pursue something that's inherently good. And so that's where I like to start with my students, is defining that. And so when I get questions like, hey, are things way better now? Yes, it is. But am I done? Absolutely not. I'm going to pursue this until the day I die. And that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, I love that. Great answer. It's resting in it, but knowing it's not the end of it, right? Being at peace where you're at. And I think that's a beautiful, real way of looking at your approach to lifelong learning. I'm happy with where I am. I'm grateful that I am where I am. It's amazing that I've come this far, but I'm still only getting started, right? And combining those two things together is the real sweet sauce. That's the sweet spot of like, oh yeah, things are wonderful right now. What a blessing this is. But man, I'm so excited to work towards the next thing and the next thing, because there's never, as you're pursuing good, like I think you said, right? There's no end to that pursuit. That does not have a final resting place. You're constantly getting better. That's really great, man. So right now we're going to take 1 minute. We're going to step out, shout out the sponsor of this platform. When we come back though, I want to talk like practicality, right? Talking about loving through purpose beyond profit. When you let love overflow in every business relationship, how does that practically look as you step into different relationships and you step into different situations? What do you do to let love overflow? How do you have to present yourself, and how do you have to combat difficult situations when that is your focal point? And how do you stay focused on that day after day, meeting after meeting, client after client? We'll talk about that in 1 minute. We'll be right back. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So this is a great conversation. First of all, I'm loving this, Jeremy. Letting love overflow in every business relationship. How do you approach that on a daily basis?
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, when you know what your mission is and it aligns with your life purpose to love God and love people, and it uses your gifts and your skill sets, and you're serving a group of people that you're empathetic towards, you define that inherently good mission, you have an obligation to communicate that and help people pursue that mission. And the number one thing that holds people back from pursuing the mission is belief. And so your job in the marketing of your business is to help people believe truth, to provide evidence for truth. Because most people, when they think of their marketing, they go to the street corner with a megaphone and just start shouting out solutions. You should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And the problem with that is if that's all the people needed to hear, they would have done it a long time ago. What they're really wrestling with is what James talks about when he says faith without works is dead faith. Your works, the actions you take, every single action you take in your life is motivated by your beliefs. And so if you want to help people take an actual step forward, what most people need is evidence for truth. How do you provide evidence for truth? One of the most powerful things that you can do is what we're doing right now, which is telling stories. So you have an obligation to tell your story because, as we mentioned before, you're in the journey too. You're not at the end destination telling everybody else what to do. You're saying, this is what it looks like for me and pursuing this mission with you guys right now is part of this movement. I'm a facilitator and a contributor to this mission, not the perfect expert. And so telling redemptive stories of overcoming problems, which is why I love this podcast, because that's what you're doing. You're providing evidence that breakthrough is possible, and listening to the witness and the testimony of other people elevates other people's beliefs, which is why you should listen to podcasts like this for that exact reason, because it's the same reason Jesus told parables, because our mind understands truth through the lens of story. You can tell 1,000 statistics, but it won't be as impactful as inviting someone into the moment when you struggled with the problem that you now help people overcome. The moment of vulnerability and authenticity, you're like, I'm struggling with this too. And this is what I've learned, but I know I'm not done. So I think number one, practically what it looks like is telling vulnerable, redemptive stories of what it's like to pursue the mission, to give people a glimpse of hope. But then another element, if you don't mind me sharing, is actually giving people practical experiences of what it's like a taste and see experience of what it's like to pursue the mission. So you asked me right before we started the live, you asked, hey, do you have a lead magnet? Do you have a valuable resource to share, right? And so I gave you the assessment. And the reason I gave you the assessment was because it asked people questions. And hopefully by the end of those questions, it gives them an accurate snapshot of exactly where they are in their journey to loving people through their business. I want to give people a taste and see experience of this is what it's like. And self-awareness of where you are is part of that journey. And so if you can take parts of the journey, little baby steps, and give someone an active experience where they have that aha moment of, oh my gosh, or this is what it's like to pursue the mission, you can elevate their belief. And when you help people elevate their belief, now they're empowered to take action. And when they're ready to take action, design all of your products and services to hold people's hands and walk them across that bridge when they're ready to take action. But don't skip the part of telling stories and creating experiences for people to empower them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Man, we could go into that for a long time, every little nook and cranny of that, because that's the process. And going back to telling the stories, right? Being able to effectively tell those stories and have them kind of prepared that these are the stories that have shaped me, shaped my business, shaped my life. How did you personally come up with those stories and find the ones that stood out the most to you? Because I think, and I'm talking about this because I think this is where people struggle of like, well, what story do I tell, and how do I tell that story effectively? And but you're so right? People are going to connect to you. We gather information and we process information so much better when it comes in the form of a story. So how have you personally done that for yourself in what you do?
I love this question. I think every story starts with a problem, because there is no redemption without a problem, right? And so one thing that I use for myself is almost like a rhythmic practice, is asking myself, when was the last time that I experienced this problem, right? So in my customer research, I basically identify some of the painful problems that my audience is going through. And there's a lot of business coaches that talk about your target audience and understanding your client avatar and what are they going through, and basically just trying to conduct some research to know what feelings they have, what actions they're taking in their life or in their business, what false beliefs or true beliefs do they have, right? And so I ask myself the same questions and ask, when was the last time that I experienced insecurity? Because that's something that my audience feels as well. When was the last time that I felt discouraged because I felt like I should be further along than I was? So I start with the problem and I ask myself, I want to think of a real moment, like a time and place where I experienced this most recently. So even like today, right? I can ask myself that question. And leading up to this podcast, there was absolutely a temptation where I'm sitting outside in my backyard and I'm doing my devotions, and it's time to go in and start getting ready for the podcast. And there's this temptation welling up inside of me of like, I really want to make this about myself. I really want to make myself look really good instead of giving the glory and honor and praise to God, right? And so that real life battle is going on inside of me. And so I'm just reminded, okay, I know that maybe I'm trying to get my worth from how people will react to this podcast. I want to distribute this everywhere. I want people to send me comments and messages. And as a business owner, I'm sure you can relate to that in the sense of you love when your post goes viral. You love when people are responding to your stories. They're like, man, that was incredible. Like, oh my gosh, sign me up, or whatever you got going on. Like, I want to be there, right? And so that temptation constantly wells up in entrepreneurs. And a lot of times that almost can feed an addiction. I remember going on a walk probably 3 or 4 years ago with my wife. And no, actually probably it's now more like 5 or 6 years ago. This is a story that I tell often. You can tell because I'm messing up the timeline. But my wife and I went on this walk. It was New Year's Day. And I had my Stripe notification sound on my phone on. And like every like half mile, my phone is going off. I got a Stripe notification. I was making money while walking in the woods. And I thought, I've made it. Like, I'm making money just going on a walk. This is amazing, you know? And that ego started to soar. Every time I heard that cha-ching, like it's the cheesiest cha-ching sound on the notification, every time my ego soars and my addiction grows. And man, where was I going with that? I think that when you can fall in love with the reactions to people responding to your products and services, or people responding to your stories, but telling stories sometimes where you're not the hero, but God is, or you're not the hero, but a mentor was, or this truth was that changed your life, because truth is bigger than you, because God is bigger than you. I think kind of keeps you humble as well. As far as thinking through stories, yeah, asking yourself, when was the last time that I experienced the problem that I'm trying to address in other people?
And what I notice you do and your stories that you're telling here is you're asking yourself a lot of questions, right? So this is the foundation. If anybody's watching or listening right now and they're wondering, like, why am I not finding the breakthroughs that I need in my life? You're not asking enough questions. And if you are asking enough questions, then you're not taking action on the answers that you're getting, because questions are the answer. It can really be that simple. The better questions we ask ourselves, the better questions we ask other people, the better answers we're going to get, the more clarity we're going to get, which is going to lead us to have to take the actions to find the breakthrough. So you can't leave the action part out, but you have to ask the questions. And I notice you come back again and again to questions that you asked yourself and questions that you asked others. And I was just this morning, I was given a presentation at a chamber of commerce, and this was I talk on communication. So I was talking on the attitudes you need to have to be a brilliant communicator, and asking questions is the foundation of that presentation, because that circles around everything. And why do we see such poor communication in our world today? Because people aren't asking questions. And especially when just think of social media, and you don't see somebody asking somebody a question on social media on, like, say a Facebook argument. You see somebody telling somebody how things are, right? This is how it is. This is how I see it. And, I don't even want to read the reply. Instead of asking a question to understand more, asking a question to dive deeper and get deeper into a subject so that you can understand somebody or understand a scenario better, which is going to give you a more nuanced perspective on it. And it's going to expand your horizons, and you're going to come to a different conclusion. So I love that. And also, you're talking about the story, and you're making me think of Story Brand. I don't know if you've ever heard of Story Brand or not, by Donald Miller, but
Yeah.
man, who is the hero in these situations? When you're making yourself the hero, you're going to have a lot of problems, because when you're creating a business and trying to serve people, you're not the hero. Somebody else needs to be the hero, and you are a guide to help them get to where they're going. And I just love that Story Brand framework. And I believe that's also a secular framework. I don't think there's anything biblical involved in that framework, but it applies in the sense that when you make somebody else the hero of their journey and you're guiding them, now you're serving them. Now you've become a servant leader, which leads me into the servant leadership subject and topic. How do you perceive yourself in servant leadership? How can somebody, maybe it's things we've already discussed here, but I wanted to ask you, like, how do you view superb servant leadership? Anything you could add to what we've already talked about?
Yeah. I think leadership of other people is when it's best, when it's effective, is overflow of how you're leading yourself. So like you just mentioned, if you're not asking yourself questions, if you're not, I spend a lot of time sitting in my backyard underneath my tree, journaling, asking myself questions, and leading myself, pointing myself back to truth. Asking other people questions, not pretending like I have the answers to everything. That's not what a leader is. A leader is not someone who knows what to do in every situation. A leader is willing to step back and allow someone else to speak into your life, or to speak into the situation, who has specific experience that was designed by God for them to lead in that moment. So I think a servant leader, it means you don't have to lead in every moment, in the sense of you don't have to provide the answers in every moment. But you do need to be asking the questions, as you just mentioned, and leading yourself, like putting rhythms and accountability in your life to make sure that you're constantly filled up so that you can overflow and pour love in other people. That's what it means to me.
So good. And I think I just had a revelation while we were just talking here, of which it goes into what you were just saying. If you want to be a leader, you have to first know how to lead yourself. But in order to lead yourself, you have to ask yourself the right questions. So asking yourself questions is leading yourself and taking action, right? So if you want to be a great leader of your own life, you need to ask yourself the right questions and then take action on those questions, because questions are leading. A question is leading somebody to an answer. That is what a leader does, is lead somebody to an answer. So if you're not asking yourself those questions, you're not leading yourself into the person that you know God created you to be, or to find out who that person is that God created you to be. So I just had a breakthrough on that I'm going to be using, I think, anytime I talk moving forward. But I absolutely love that, Jeremy. So thank you for sharing that and sharing your insight there, because that is really, really powerful. So I love going into quotes, right? As we near the end of this episode, a quote or saying that you live by, you had said, your story is a beacon of hope and change to the people that you're called to serve. Dig into that a little bit, because that's a really good quote.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, struggle with believing that maybe my authenticity would ruin my credibility. Maybe if people really knew who I was and really saw that I'm still struggling with the same things that I want to help other people with, then my credibility just goes into the tank. And so does my business. And I've seen the exact opposite every single time, that when people are vulnerable and sharing redemptive stories, it creates an incredible environment and space to be a beacon of hope and change for the people that you've been positioned to serve. It really highlights you as someone, again, who is in the journey. It makes you a safe person to approach. It builds your credibility in the sense of you're actually building trust by exposing the flaws that you have faced in your life. But knowing, when you really, only a healed person can expose their flaws to other people. Like, I don't believe you're supposed to expose all your flaws to everybody all the time. Like, that's not safe, right? But hopefully you're exposing yourself first to the Lord and your flaws to him, and receiving grace over that. And when you receive grace over that, you're a safe human being now, because you're not trying to heal yourself through other people, right? Which goes back to the needing people versus loving people. You're not a safe individual if you're pretending to be something that you're not. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost a sign of maturity when you have that level of humility, because you have received healing in that area from the Lord. And then after those conversations I have with God, then it moves into my wife, right? And then into my community. And then some of those move into my business as well. And so some of those stories, maybe it's not even for your customers or your prospects. Maybe some of these stories, you just need to be having conversations with God first, right? And then your spouse, and then your close, tight-knit community, and then your business. And that's kind of what we were talking about with the overflow, right? And it's up to you to discern those boundaries and where those lines are. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And being vulnerable and being authentic it's interesting, isn't it? Because you feel like if I say these things that I'm struggling with, I'm going to be exposed. Nobody's going to, especially coming from the coaching place where you feel like in your own head, I got to know everything and I can't show a weakness or people aren't going to want to work with me. It's counterintuitive to think like, if I expose this about myself that I'm struggling with, it's actually going to endear people to me. And also the interesting part is the only way to ever heal from something is to talk about it. Whether you journal about it, you talk about God with it, you go to counseling, you get a coach, whatever it might be, you need to talk about the thing. It needs to be talked about out loud for you to process it and for you to get through it. It's the only way for you to get through it. You have to be able to say it. Like, you've got to be able to speak it. So it's beautiful, man. I love it. And it changes, because I was also talking about this morning, our misconception of what leadership is, our misconception of what a leader is. We've had bad examples in our lives of managers and people who only ever tell other people what to do and seem like they don't have a fault or a crack in themselves. Those people give us this false example of what real, true servant leadership is. And when we have more servant leadership in this world, everybody feels more capable, open, and allowed to be who they are, to heal that thing that's going to take them to the next level. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and all of that. I want to let people know, before we do wrap this bad boy up, there is that assessment that we were talking about, the Purpose Beyond Profit assessment. I'm going to drop that link in the description. If you're watching this live right now, it's not in there yet. If you're watching this afterwards, it's in there. I'm going to go back and drop it in once we're done. So make sure that you take that absolutely free Purpose Beyond Profit assessment. Jeremy, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm really glad that you and I have had a chance to connect, and I've had a chance to get to know you. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Rob. I think you are creating space for stories to be told. And we've spent most of this podcast episode talking about the power of stories and how much that can bring real transformation to people's lives. So thanks for having me on and creating space for people to share vulnerably and to see real breakthrough in people's lives. It's a blessing. So appreciate you.
Absolutely, brother. Glad to do it. Make sure you check out apurposebeyondprofit.com. This is another incredible, true testimony of breakthrough. This has been the Unstuck Movement.